Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Indian occupation forces have martyred two more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. One of them was killed in the army custody, while the other one was targeted in a search operation in the Baramulla district. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 409 days. Iran says the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain will bear consequences of their normalization deals with Israel. In a televised speech, President Hassan Rouhani said Israel has intensified atrocities in Palestine with every passing day. This comes a day after Israel's Prime Minister and Foreign Ministers of Bahrain and UAE signed the deals to establish ties with Israel. A UN fact-finding mission says Venezuela's government has committed serious violations amounting to crimes against humanity. The UN team says President Nicolas Maduro and other top officials were implicated. Venezuela's UN ambassador has described the mission as a hostile initiative. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Indian-occupied Kashmir, where occupation forces have martyred two more civilians in Baramulla district. The Indian troops arrested one of the youths during a cordon and search operation in the Sopore area of the district and later killed him in custody. The other youth was martyred during a military crackdown in the Uri area of the district. Authorities have increased the deployment of the troops in the area, fearing demonstrations against the killings. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's curfew and communications blackout for the past 409 days. The Taliban say an agreement has been reached with Kabul on most of the topics related to the mechanism of starting the sessions. After the second meeting with the Kabul representatives in Doha, Taliban spokesperson Mohammad Naeem said two sides have agreed to establish a liaison committee to sort out the differences. Naeem said, however, there are some issues that have not been agreed upon yet. He said leaders of both the delegations confirmed the discussion on issues will be held after the mechanism and timetable for the dialogue is agreed. They said the negotiations should be for the solution of Afghanistan's problems and not for the happiness of others. The Taliban said they seek to work with Kabul for the establishment of a truly Islamic Afghan inclusive central system in an independent Afghanistan. Iran says the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain will bear consequences of the normalization deals with Israel. In a televised speech, President Hassan Rouhani said Israel has intensified atrocities in Palestine with each passing day. The president said this normalization spree will have far-reaching consequences for the region. Rouhani's remarks come a day after Israel's Prime Minister and Foreign Ministers of Bahrain and the UAE signed deals to establish ties with Israel. Palestinians have also rejected the normalization deals as a betrayal of their cause. Palestinians have staged protests against the UAE and Bahrain's normalization deal with Israel. Earlier, Israel's Prime Minister and Foreign Ministers of the UAE and Bahrain participated in the deal signing ceremony hosted by the White House. More in this report.
Outraged Palestinians rallied outside the UN office in Gaza and occupied West Bank to flee the UAE and Bahrain's normalization of ties with Israel. Chanting slogans and burning banners, the demonstrators said they refused to concede the rights of the Palestinian people. President Mahmoud Abbas said only Israel's withdrawal from occupied territories can bring peace to the Middle East. The disappointed Palestinians saw the move by the two Arab countries as an endorsement of Israel's occupation and operation of Palestinian territories.
For us as a Palestinian, we consider it very deep stabbing in the back of the Palestinians. It is a free offer for the Israelis to continue their occupation for our land and to expansion their settlements and carry on in the process of annexation of many Palestinian lands.
Hamas said the people of the region continue to view Israel as an enemy and accused the two Arab countries of siding with the enemy.
It's a day of rage for the Palestinian people and the Islamic and Arab world, a day of humiliation and insult for the leaders of Bahrain and Emirates who are normalizing with the Zionist occupation.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump hailed the dawn of a new Middle East after the three states signed agreements. Trump said he expects Saudi Arabia to be among 7 to 9 other Gulf countries to normalize relations with Israel.
I spoke with the King of Saudi Arabia. At the right time, I do think they will come in. Yes, I do. This is a very big and very historic moment, and I think everyone agrees to that. But we'll have other countries coming in fairly rapidly.
This is the first time Arab nations have established relations with Israel since Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994.
Meanwhile, Israel says its warplanes and combat helicopters have bombed the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces said the air raids were carried out in retaliation for rockets fired from the Gaza Strip into Israeli territory. Israeli military said its fighter planes and choppers hit a number of Hamas targets. The military claimed it destroyed a Hamas weapons and explosives production plant and a military compound in the strikes. No casualties have been reported yet. France says it was not too late for Lebanon's politicians to form a government to save it from a crippling economic crisis. In a statement, a presidency official said Paris regretted the fact that there was still no government 2 weeks after President Emmanuel Macron set a September 15 deadline. Paris has called on the Lebanese politicians to act in the interest of the country by allowing Mustafa Adib to form a government. Adib was chosen as the country's new premier after the previous government was forced to step down following the catastrophic Beirut explosion. Lebanon's political elite have bickered over how the cabinet is formed. Turkey says its security forces have fended off an attack in the Idlib de-escalation zone in northwestern Syria. In a statement, the defense ministry said the groups disguised as civilians approached many of the Turkey's observation posts in the region. The ministry blamed the Syrian regime for being behind the attack. It said one of these groups staged an attack near a Turkish observation post and was then dispersed. No damage to the observation post was reported. Idlib falls within a de-escalation zone forged under an agreement between Turkey and Russia. The area has been the subject of multiple ceasefire understandings, frequently violated by the warring sides. Turkey has extended the operations of its Yavuz energy drill ship in the eastern Mediterranean waters. In a maritime notice, the ship has been mandated to continue working in the waters of Cyprus Island until October the 12th. The notice said Yavuz will be accompanied by the 3 other Turkish ships. The notice warned all other vessels are strongly advised not to enter the area. Turkey and Greece have been at odds over the delimitation of their continental shelves and their natural resources. The EU and NATO have asked the two countries to resolve the matter through talks after a recent escalation over the disputed waters. President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out holding elections in the conflict-ridden Donbass until Ukraine regains the region. According to Zelensky's office, the president said this to Austria's National Council President Wolfgang Sobotka. Zelensky said election will be impossible in the presence of illegal armed groups and foreign troops in the region. He said Minsk agreement be followed in resolving the Donbass issue. Sobotka said Austria supports setting the eastern Ukraine conflict through negotiations in the Normandy format. Recently, Kiev has repeatedly called for revising the Minsk agreements, especially regarding handing over border control to Ukraine and local elections. Newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says he will implement policies to beef up Tokyo's alliance with Washington. In his first news conference, Suga said Tokyo also hopes to establish stable ties with China and Russia. The new premier said he will do his best to protect employment while countering the coronavirus. He said the biggest challenge they are facing is the spread of COVID-19, as he pledged to beef up testing capacity. Suga said there must not be a political vacuum at a time of national crisis. The Prime Minister said he will continue his predecessor Abe's policies. Suga became the premier after bagging 314 votes in 465-member lower house. China says the World Trade Organization's ruling against the US proves it has been breaking international trade rules. At a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said China hopes the US will respect the ruling. Wang said Beijing expects Washington will take practical actions to maintain the multilateral trading system. US President Donald Trump said he is not a fan of the WTO and he will do something about the organization as it has let China get away with murder. US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer argued that Washington presented enough evidence of China's intellectual theft. Earlier, the WTO ruled that additional tariffs imposed by Washington against Beijing in 2018 were inconsistent with global trading rules. West African mediators have failed to persuade leaders of the military coup in Mali to immediately hand over power to a civilian government. This comes after the 15-member economic community of the West African states met Mali's military government. Ghana President and acting chair of ECOWAS, Nana Akufo-Addo, said they have not reached an agreement with the military junta. He said a mediating mission will return to Mali next week to try to resolve outstanding issues. Akufo-Addo said Mali needs a civilian leadership and the sanctions will only be lifted afterwards. ECOWAS imposed economic sanctions on military government after the coup on August the 18th. Welcome back. The number of COVID-19 infections in India has surpassed 5 million, the second highest in the world after the US. Nearly 1,300 people have died in the country and more than 90,000 have contracted the virus in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 933,000 lives while infecting close to 29.5 million. Details in this report.
COVID-19 pandemic is devastating healthcare systems as governments scramble to contain the virus. Germany says the coronavirus spike in a Bavarian holiday resort may be lower than feared as they investigate a rise in infections. Local authorities have tracked down more than 30 people they suspect may have been infected from the same source. Meanwhile, Britain's government says it is working hard to fix operational challenges in the testing system caused by a surge in demand.
As we expand capacity further, we're working round the clock to make sure everyone who needs a test can get a test. The vast majority of people who use our testing service get a test that is close to home, and the average distance travelled to a test site is now just 5.8 miles, down from 6.4 miles last week. But the whole House knows that there are operational challenges, and we're working hard to fix them.
The UN says it can hold an in-person meeting of the General Assembly in New York as early as November to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic. World Health Organization says countries should not put children out of school anymore as it is more detrimental for them. It said the decision to close schools should be a last resort, temporary, and only at a local level in areas with intense COVID-19 transmission.
To support countries in every situation, UNESCO, UNICEF and WHO yesterday published updated guidance on school-related public health measures in the context of COVID-19. The guidance provides practical advice for schools in areas with no cases, sporadic cases, clusters of cases, or community transmission.
Australia's Victoria state is on course to relax a strict lockdown by the end of the month after average number of cases over the last 2 weeks dropped below 50. South Korea's new virus cases also stayed below 200 for the 14th consecutive day. China reported 12 new confirmed infections of COVID-19 across the mainland, all of which were imported.
UN humanitarian chief Mark Lowcock has warned a specter of famine has returned to war-torn Yemen. He singled out Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Kuwait for giving nothing to this year's $3.4 billion appeal for desperately needed aid. Addressing the Security Council, Lowcock said famine in Yemen was averted 2 years ago because donors met 90% of the UN's funding requirements. He said today the UN appeal has received only 30%, leaving 9 million Yemenis to cope with deepening cuts to aid. The chief said if countries continue to hold back money from the humanitarian response, it will be a death sentence for many families. He once again called on all the donors to pay their pledges now and increase their support. The 75th session of the UN General Assembly has begun. The annual high-level session is set to confront some of the most serious threats to humanity, including the pandemic and economic stagnancy. More in this report.
World leaders are set to meet virtually for the first time in the United Nations' 75-year history as the General Assembly kicks off in New York. General Assembly President Volkan Bozkır was sworn in earlier on Tuesday at the closing ceremony of the 74th session of the General Assembly. In his opening remarks, Bozkır asked UN member states to uphold multilateralism.
An honor to declare open the 75th regular session of the General Assembly and call to order its first plenary meeting.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warmly congratulated General Assembly Chair Volkan Bozkır on his new role and pledged his full support. Guterres said the virtual session should be seen as an opportunity and a challenge at the same time.
Virtual participation may mean that a record number of heads of state and government take part in the high-level week, but going online will undoubtedly create new challenges. We'll need to learn as we go and continue to demonstrate the greatest flexibility.
The 75th UNGA's high-level general debate will be held on September 22nd. The UN will mark its 75th anniversary with a one-day high-level meeting at the 75th session of the General Assembly on September 21st. The theme for this event will be "The Future We Want, the UN We Need," reaffirming a collective commitment to multilateralism.
A UN fact-finding mission says Venezuela's government has committed serious violations amounting to crimes against humanity. In a report, the UN team said President Nicolas Maduro and other top officials were implicated. It said most unlawful executions by state agents have not been prosecuted in Venezuela. The mission called on other national jurisdictions and the International Criminal Court to consider prosecutions. The report found the government responded with repressive tactics to opposition protests following Maduro's re-election in 2018. But Venezuela's UN ambassador has described the fact-finding mission as a hostile initiative. EU's chief executive Ursula von der Leyen has slammed the bloc's government for an ineffective foreign policy. At her annual State of the Union address in Brussels, she said that EU must get better at responding to world events. Von der Leyen said even simple statements on EU values are getting delayed. She said the bloc must toughen its emissions cutting target to at least 55% by 2030. The EU chief said that 30% of the bloc's €750 billion coronavirus recovery package should be raised through green bonds. Talking about Brexit, she said that London will fail to seal a trade deal if it tried to rewrite last year's withdrawal agreement.
The European Union and the UK jointly agreed it was the best and only way for ensuring peace on the island of Ireland. And we will never backtrack on that. And this agreement has been ratified by this House and by the House of Commons. It cannot be unilaterally changed, disregarded or disapplied.
Hurricane Sally has made landfall on Alabama's Gulf Coast as a Category 2 storm, spreading strong winds inland across the region. The storm poses risks of life-threatening flooding along portions of the coast. The National Hurricane Center said upon landfall, the storm's winds were clocked at 165 kilometers per hour. The storm rendered more than 430,000 homes and businesses without power in Alabama, with more outages expected. A weather expert said the damage from Sally is expected to reach $2 to $3 billion. Schools, ports and businesses were closed ahead of the storm, with energy companies also shutting down more than a quarter of their oil and gas production. Sally is the 18th named storm in the Atlantic this year and the 8th tropical storm to hit the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump has declared federal emergency disaster in Oregon after wildfires ravaged the state. Oregon's Governor Keir Brown appealed for bolstering U.S. government assistance for emergency response and relief efforts. Thousands of evacuees displaced by deadly wildfires in Oregon have been living in shelters and car camping for the second week. Fire crews continue to battle the blaze, and search teams cover the ruins of incinerated homes for the missing. Dozens of fires have charred some 4.5 million acres of lands in Oregon, California and Washington state since August. The wildfires have killed 36 people and continue to ravage several small towns and thousands of homes. The wildfire in Spain's northern region of Galicia has remained active after 12 different blazes in Orense city covered the province in a huge cloud of smoke. The Galicia Region Fire Information Service said 6 of the flames have been controlled, while other 6 are still active. The Spanish military said 121 firefighters and 42 fire engines have been deployed to battle the wildfires. State media reported at least 6,700 hectares have burned. Britain's Prince William and his wife Kate have visited an iconic bagel shop in London and were swiftly put to work. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge kneaded tray after tray of dough, which is then boiled and baked to make the bagels. William said he had never before tried one of the shop's bagels. The royal's Twitter page said their visit was meant to thank those who have gone above and beyond to help others during pandemic. Barbados has announced that it will remove Queen Elizabeth as its head of state to become a republic. The country aims to complete the process before the 55th anniversary of the independence from Britain in November 2021. Prime Minister Mia Mottley said it is the time to leave the colonial past behind. The British Foreign Office said the UK and Barbados have an enduring partnership and will continue working together. Turkey has successfully tested its first indigenous flying car, Jazari. In a statement, the manufacturer Baykar said Jazari ascended to 10 meters in its 230-kilogram prototype flight tests. Chief Technology Officer Selçuk Bartaş said it will take an estimated 10 to 15 years for Jazari to hit the roads. He said the car could be utilized for recreational purposes such as quad bikes in rural areas in the next 3 to 4 years. Bartaş said the company will make more advanced prototypes in the upcoming process and perform flights with a human on board. The car is named after Ismail al-Jazari, a renowned 12th century Muslim engineer and polymath. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Dubai's state-owned DP World says it is partnering with an Israeli group to possibly open a direct shipping line between the two states. The announcement came a day after Israel and the UAE signed an agreement to normalize ties, boost trade and economic collaboration. DP World said it is partnering with an Israeli DOHA Tower group to bid for one of Israel's 2 main ports. DP World Chairman Sultan Ahmed bin Suleiman said building the trade route will help doing business easily and efficiently. The direct shipping line will be built between the small Red Sea port of Eilat and Dubai's Jebel Ali. Apple has unveiled a new personalized workout subscription service alongside new smartwatches and tablet computers. The new Fitness Plus collects health data gathered by an Apple Watch and then displays it alongside workout videos shown on a larger display. Apple said the platform will compete with existing fitness apps on iOS from Peloton, Les Mills and Fit. It also poses a challenge to Fitbit, whose wearables benefit from their own health coaching subscription service. Apple also introduced a new Apple Watch Series 6 that monitors blood oxygen for $399 and a low-cost Apple Watch SE for $279. Apple's biggest seller, the iPhone, is expected to be announced next month after its launch was delayed by several weeks because of the pandemic. European markets are trading mixed as investors are trading cautiously as they await the outcome of a two-day meeting of the US Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee. The Pan-European Stock 600 is up fractionally, with retail stocks adding over 1%. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB has shed marginally. Frankfurt's DAX and Paris's CAC 40 have edged above the flat line. Earlier stocks in Asia Pacific also traded mixed, with Chinese, Japanese and Hong Kong bourses edging lower, while SOS Kospi and Australia's ASX 200 gained. Wall Street's main indices have risen as investors hope the Federal Reserve will continue to keep interest rates low for a long period. Upbeat quarterly results from FedEx also boosted the consumer sentiment. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is trading marginally higher, while the S&P 500 is also trading fractionally higher. The Nasdaq Composite Index has shed about 0.25%. Meanwhile, oil prices rose for the second day as a hurricane closed US offshore oil and gas production. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.